"That belt doesn't make you dangerous," Muhammad Ali said. He wasn't whispering. He wasn't joking. He was standing 3 feet from Chuck Norris in a room full of the most dangerous fighters on the planet, and he was smiling. The room went completely still. Not nervous still, not awkward still. Held breath still. The kind of silence that only comes when everyone in the room knows something irreversible is about to happen, and nobody wants to be the one who blinks first. Chuck Norris looked down at the championship belt in his hands. Then he looked back up. And what happened in the next 4 minutes would never appear in any newspaper, never make a single headline. 6 people witnessed it. 3 of them refused to ever speak about it publicly, and one of them, a former Korean War veteran who had seen genuine combat, later said it was the most controlled violence he had ever watched in his life. This is that story. The city was burning with a different kind of energy that year. Vietnam was bleeding into the evening news every night. Muscle Beach was producing giants. Hollywood was rewriting itself. And somewhere in the collision of all of it, martial arts had become the new religion of American masculinity. Every tough man in the country was trying to prove something. Chuck Norris wasn't trying to prove anything. He'd already proven it. By 1969, Chuck Norris had done what almost no Western fighter had ever done. He had gone to Asia, trained under Korean grandmasters, absorbed techniques that American gyms had never even theorized about, and come home with a championship belt in Tang Soo Do that was not symbolic, it was earned, fight by fight, tournament by tournament, in rooms where the stakes were real and the men across from him were not performing. He was 29 years old, quiet, methodical, with a stillness about him that the people who trained with him described the same way every time. You never saw it coming. You never even saw him move. He had already caught the attention of Bruce Lee, which meant he was operating at a level most men couldn't comprehend. But on this particular Thursday evening, none of that mattered to Muhammad Ali. Ali had come to Los Angeles for a different reason entirely. He was in the middle of one of the most complicated chapters of his life. His boxing license had been stripped. He had refused military induction. He was fighting a legal battle all the way to the Supreme Court while watching lesser men step into the ring and collect belts that should have been his. Ali was burning, not with anger, with energy, with the specific restless fire of a man who knows exactly what he is capable of and has been told he is not allowed to prove it. He had started showing up at martial arts demonstrations, not to train, not out of humility, out of curiosity, and if we're being honest, out of the particular boredom of a genius with nowhere to direct his genius. The gathering that Thursday was private, invitation only, a small exhibition at a training space in West Hollywood, maybe 30 feet by 30 feet of polished wood floor, a handful of folding chairs against the walls, and about a dozen men who collectively represented more legitimate fighting ability than most combat sports organizations could claim on their entire rosters. Bruce Lee was there. Ed Parker, the father of American Kenpo, was there. Joe Louis, the heavyweight karate champion, stood near the back wall with his arms crossed, like a man who had decided he was done being impressed by anything. And Chuck Norris stood at the center of the room. He was demonstrating a sequence, precise, economic, the kind of movement that doesn't waste a single degree of rotation. Muhammad Ali walked in late. He was never not the largest presence in any room. It wasn't his size. Ali was lean, almost elegant in his proportions. It was his frequency. The man vibrated at a different level. He commanded attention the way a tuning fork commands resonance, not by asking for it, but by simply existing at a pitch that everything else had to respond to. He watched Norris for about 45 seconds. Then he said it. The words landed like a stone dropped in still water, clean, precise, spreading outward. Every head in the room turned. Ali wasn't looking away. He was watching Norris with that specific expression, the expression that boxing historians have spent decades trying to accurately describe, somewhere between amusement and absolute clinical focus. "I've seen belts," Ali continued. He was walking forward now, slow, hands relaxed at his sides. "I've seen a lot of belts. They give those to men. Don't mean the man is dangerous, means he was dangerous once, in front of people who were judging." He stopped about 6 feet from Norris. This was not a room full of people who were easily rattled. Joe Louis had knocked out men who outweighed him by 60 pounds. Bruce Lee had already, by this point, hit people with speeds that had been measured and couldn't be fully explained. Ed Parker had built an entire fighting system from the ground up. These were not civilians witnessing a celebrity moment. These were killers, in the technical controlled sense, watching two apex predators circle each other in a very small space. And every single one of them went completely quiet, because they understood what was actually happening. Ali had not insulted the belt. Ali had issued an invitation, wrapped in mockery, delivered with that smile, but invitation nonetheless. The question was whether Chuck Norris would accept it. Chuck Norris did not react immediately. This is the part that the witnesses always came back to when they tried to describe that night, not what happened after, the pause. Norris set the belt down on a folding chair near the wall, slowly, without drama, like a man setting down a glass of water. He turned back to Ali. He said nothing. This was, in its own way, the most dangerous thing he could have done. Ali's smile stayed, but his eyes changed. You could see it, the witnesses said. The smile was for the room. What happened behind his eyes was something else entirely. Ali had spent his entire career reading men. He had faced Sonny Liston, who could bend iron bars with his hands. He had stood across from men who intended to remove him from consciousness by force. He knew how to read fear. He knew how to read aggression. He knew how to read ego. What he was reading in Chuck Norris in that moment was none of those things. What he was reading was stillness. Not the stillness of a man who was intimidated, not the stillness of a man calculating, the stillness of a man who had already decided and was simply waiting for the world to catch up to his decision. Ali tilted his head. 3 seconds of silence. Bruce Lee, standing against the far wall, later described that silence as the loudest thing he had ever heard in a room full of people. Ali laughed, genuinely. It was the laugh of a man who had just discovered something interesting. All right, Ali said. He rolled his shoulders. He was still smiling, but the quality of the smile had shifted. It wasn't performance anymore. It was the expression of a man who had just decided to pay full attention. "Show me something," Ali said. Norris looked at him for a long moment. "Before we go any further, you need to understand what these two men actually represented in that moment. Muhammad Ali was, by every measurable standard, one of the greatest athletes who had ever lived. His hand speed had been clocked at levels that neurologists used as case studies. His footwork, the way he moved in 3 dimensions simultaneously, was so advanced that boxing coaches were still trying to reverse engineer it decades later. He was also, and this point cannot be understated, a man who had trained with Bruce Lee. Not just sparred with, trained with. Bruce Lee, who was in the process of dismantling everything the martial arts world thought it understood about human speed and efficiency, had found in Norris a training partner worthy of serious effort. That was not a designation he gave lightly. These two men were now standing 6 feet apart on a polished wood floor in West Hollywood, and they were about to show each other exactly what they were. Wanted to destroy him, and discovering again and again that the space between their intention and his body was something he could control. They were 2 different answers to the same question. And in that West Hollywood room, with 6 witnesses and no cameras, in the weight of nothing but the truth between them, they had found, for 4 minutes, that their answers were more similar than different. That was what the silence meant at the end. That was what Ali's laughter meant. That was what Norris's quiet, "I could have," meant.
Chuck Norris went on to become something that popular culture eventually reduced to a punchline, and then, in a strange twist, to a kind of folk hero. The internet made him a mythology. The action films made him an icon. But the people who actually trained with him, who stood across from him on mats and wood floors in outdoor courtyards in conditions that had nothing to do with cameras or competition, those people have never had any trouble articulating what he actually was. He was a man who had made an absolute commitment, not to fame, not to winning, to the work, to the daily, invisible, uncelebrated practice of becoming something beyond what nature had originally provided. The belt that Ali mocked was real. It represented genuine accomplishment. But Ali was also right. The belt wasn't what made Chuck Norris dangerous. What made him dangerous was 15 years of mornings, 15 years of showing up when no one was watching and doing the work anyway. 15 years of choosing precision over power, technique over ego, the correct movement over the impressive movement. The belt was just the receipt. The real transaction had happened in 10,000 training sessions that nobody ever filmed, and nobody ever witnessed, and nobody ever applauded. That is what Ali had actually mocked, and what Norris had actually shown him. Not a championship, not a record, not a reputation. A life's work made visible for 4 minutes in a room with 6 witnesses. The next day, none of the 6 people in the room said anything publicly. The day after that, Chuck Norris was back in the gym at 6 in the morning. The belt was on the shelf. He wasn't looking at it. He was already working. Because the real fighters, the ones who actually understand what combat is, what discipline is, what the body is genuinely capable of, they are never finished. There is no moment where the work is complete. There is only the next morning, the next session, the next refinement of something that was already close to perfect.